Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very exciting episode in which I will be interviewing a newly matched neurosurgery resident. Mir, welcome to the channel.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start by asking you a question that a lot of people ask me about. Is neurosurgery life very difficult as people talk about?
I think my appearances probably say it. Actually, I'm in scrubs. I apologize to your audience because I was in the hospital and the timing just worked out. I'm glad that we could find the time to do this. But yeah, it is. It is. I think it's very difficult for sure. I'm in my intern year. I'm basically living at the hospital at this point. And I mean, it's rewarding if you're really passionate about it, but it's tough.
Can you tell our audience before we talk about your success and your journey about a day in your life? What time do you wake up? Uh, what do you do during the day, and how does your day end at what time?
Yeah, for sure. That is highly variable throughout your residency, depending on what rotation you're doing. Currently, I'm on service as an intern, so I wake up around 4 a.m., sometimes sooner if I need to write notes. And then I go to the hospital. Usually, I'm there by 5, and we start rounding, and then after the rounds are done, I start holding the pager, which is constantly buzzing. I'm basically in charge of the service during the day until around 5:30 to 6 p.m. when I start signing out. But practically, I'm there usually until after 7 or even 8 p.m. During the day, everything that comes up from any consults, any bedside procedures, managing the ICU patients, floor patients, and other things are my responsibility.
Awesome. So now I want to switch gears and ask you what got you interested in neurosurgery before we talk about your path.
Of course, I got interested into neurosurgery towards the end of my medical school, so I wasn't interested necessarily in neurosurgery from a very early stage. I saw all the specialties and I knew I wanted to do a specialty that acutely save lives, has emergencies, has complex surgeries, and has a lot of intersection with research. All of that pointed towards surgery, and then I learned about patients in my country, Iran, which were very underserved due to multiple factors, and decided that basically it became personal for me, and I decided to pursue this. So hopefully one day I can give back.
Awesome. So now let's talk a little bit about your journey. Where did you start? When did you go to med school? When did you graduate? And what did you do to get into neurosurgery residency in the US?
Yeah, to briefly go over that, I did my medical school in my country, Iran, in Tehran University. After I was finished with that, it took me a while to be able to get a visa and come to the US, mostly because of my nationality. It's a little challenging. Then I got here, I started as a research fellow in Department of Neurosurgery at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center at Harvard in Boston. I did almost 2 years of research in vascular neurosurgery with my mentors, Drs. Ogilvy and Dr. Thomas. And then while I was doing that, I applied for the pre-residency fellowship in neurosurgery at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. And that was a 2-year program that I did, and we can get into details later. And on my second year of that program, I applied for neurosurgery residency and I matched.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's amazing. At what stage of this journey did you do your step exams? And can you tell us a little bit about the importance of the scores for matching into neurosurgery and what kind of resources, the main resources you used for that?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that I have to mention is that Iran is maybe an exception in this category because they don't allow us to take steps while we're medical students. So I had to take my step one after I was done with I was graduated from medical school. I think I took it less than a year after I graduated while I was doing research in Iran. And then my second step I took while I was a research fellow at Harvard. And for my pre-residency fellowship, I was required to take step 3 as well, which I also did just I think 2 months after my step 2 while I was a research fellow. In terms of importance for neurosurgery, well, I think neurosurgery has one of the highest average step scores in people who MASH. With the step 1 losing its score, I think now more focus is being placed on step 2. But to be honest with you, for foreign graduates in neurosurgery, I think it's sort of a given that you have a very high step score. And I don't think having a high score like a 260 something or 270 something would change anything for a foreign graduate. However, not having a good score or having an average score may be a disadvantage. So that's why I think people should make the biggest effort to score high in steps, but they should just know that it's not going to be an advantage. And like as long as you have a decent score, then no one is going to care about your score.
I kind of agree with you because I feel the same applies for plastic surgery for all these people we help match into the extremely competitive specialties. Is the fact that when they match someone who's IMG into a specialty like neurosurgery or plastic surgery, they're already making a huge exception. So for them to look at your application and seriously consider you, step, in my opinion, and what I've seen so far, is kind of low on the priority list. They want to make sure that what your career is gonna be. Are you gonna be able to function well within the U.S. healthcare system? Are you a nice person? Should we invest in that person, and maybe that person becomes a leader in the future and advances the field? So I feel like the exception that they're making for a foreign grad to match into these extremely competitive specialties is so much, and step becomes not very high. They don't want you to fail the exam. They don't want you scoring extremely low scores because that's a risk for them when you end up applying to the boards and failing the boards. But they also I don't feel for specifically those who match into extremely competitive specialties, IMGs, I don't think the score is what makes it happen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And actually, this may be a controversial opinion that I have, but I actually think the same about research. I think having a strong research resume is sort of a requirement in a specialty for neurosurgery. And people get into this habit of, oh, I'm going to publish 100 papers and then I'm going to match. Unfortunately or fortunately, that's not the case. As long as your research resume says that you know how to do research and you're good at it, then that's just, the box is checked. That's it. Just because you have more papers or, I don't know, 200 papers, it's not going to get you anywhere necessarily, because it is expected from a foreign graduate applying to neurosurgery that they have an outstanding research resume. And as you said, things that are more important are things that would directly affect how you function as a resident in the residency, including your personality, what people that have worked with you say about you, your clinical experience, letters of recommendation, and things like that.
Yeah, I actually agree with that too, because as you said, you have to have publications. You can't expect to match into, although I've seen that in rare circumstances, to match into extremely competitive specialties and you have like 2 or 3 papers. So it's a given, as you said, to have a decent number. And nobody knows what is that perfect number, but it's expected to have a decent number of publications that correlates with the number of years. Spend 2 years, you're expected to get more than somebody who spent 2 months. But I don't believe that, if you have 150, you're more likely to get public interviews compared to someone who has 100, because both are phenomenal numbers. So at some point, the curve plateaus and the return on the number of publications doesn't yield much value to your chances of getting interviews and chances of matching. And other things play a role. And that's why I tell always people, don't just listen to the number game. Like I want to publish 200 papers. I want to score 270 plus. These are important, but there are other factors that play a role. That's why having an advisor, talking to someone who's experienced with the process to guide you and remove these misconceptions and give you a real insider view is what we have done for a long time through the Match Guy by offering high quality insider view on the process. And for those people who are interested in talking to advisors who have been doing this for a long time, talking to you, talking to any other person who's been doing this for a long time, we're happy to help you with that. And you can find the links for all these services in the description below. So now we touch base on research. And before I move on to the clinical experience part, what do you think have helped you to become productive while in your research time? And what did you find to be the value of research while you were at the ID?
Yeah. I think there are different approaches to research, and there are different ways of doing research. Some people focus more on basic research, some on clinical research, some focus more on quality, some focus on quantity. My approach has always been prioritizing quality over quantity, prioritizing being the first author or the second author, compared to just like getting my name into papers and having a higher number. In my opinion, when a program director or any attending that's going to interview you and score you during your match looks at your research resume, what actually impresses them is to see that you have published as a first author in prestigious journals of your field. Because that directly tells them that, first of all, you know how to do research and you know how to do good research. I believe having one first author paper in our field, neurosurgery or JNS or stroke or JNIS or journals like that, would work better for you than having 15, third author papers anywhere. Because no one can really tell what you did in a third author paper. Unless they sit you down and actually ask you, which is never going to happen because there's no time for that, they can't tell. That's why my advice to people who are applying is to focus on quality. Maybe spend 6 months or 9 months on just one paper and get it published in JNS. And be the first author of that, as opposed to just getting your name in every paper and just trying to build up your numbers. I don't think that would change anything for you, especially in this environment that people who are applying to competitive specialties like neurosurgery, everyone has tons of papers. You're not going to get ahead by numbers, but there are very few people who actually have those very prestigious journal first author papers.
Nice. And how did you find your research mentor? That's a question that I get asked about a lot, how to find a research mentor. We have a full course on how to find research positions, talking about the perfect mentor. But how did you find yours?
To be absolutely honest with you, I think it was mostly the hand of God. Some people ask me how many emails did you send to find a research position, and the answer is one. I only sent one email.
Wow.
because I basically was introduced to my mentor through another mentor, and I looked no more, and they looked no more, and it was just like an instant match. I think one of the key factors in looking for a research position is that your priority when you're choosing between different positions or sending emails has to be, does this person have a track record of actually helping foreign graduates get matched into this competitive specialty? Your priority should not be how well known that person is. Although I was lucky that my mentors were also well known, your priority should not be whether the position is funded or not. Unless you absolutely know that you're not going to make it, you're not going to survive without funding, you shouldn't worry about that in the beginning. And your priority should not be the name or the prestige of the institute. The priority should be, does that person have a supportive mentality towards IMGs? I have heard from people in my field, attendings in my field that fundamentally believe that IMGs should not match into neurosurgery because neurosurgery is a very competitive field. Even American graduates hardly match in it. And there's no reason to hire foreigners in such a specialty. And I have had mentors that had the absolute opposite opinion. So you never want to end up somewhere that you're not welcome, and you never want to end up somewhere that you're just going to be used as manpower in order to get the productivity machine going. You want to find someone who cares about you and actually looks at you as an equal and wants to help you and lift you up. And that's all provided that you actually do a good job. No one is going to advocate for you if you do a mediocre job. So that's always the rule. But it makes a world of difference what mentality your mentor has. And one other thing that I want to mention about mentorship, I know it's maybe irrelevant to your question, but I would say the most significant bias or mistake that I see in people who want to go into neurosurgery is that they think matching in neurosurgery is through connections. That is not true. And to be honest with you, I used to have that bias too. But when I went through Match and I actually did it, I realized that no, people who only had connection did not match, and people who necessarily didn't have strong connection but were actually good, objectively good match. The reason for that is that when a program director is in the match process, they receive, as you know, hundreds and hundreds of emails from people who basically like recommend someone to them and say, this is a good guy, look into his resume. So if you think someone putting in a good word for you actually gets you anywhere, no, that's not the case. There are so many people who are getting recommended. What gets your foot in the door is being actually objectively good, having a resume that no one can dismiss. And then after that, yes, you should also have someone who vouches for you. So just thinking that you're going to match off of connections, unfortunately leads into a huge disappointment. I see many people who during research start working with, I don't know, like 40, 30, 20 attendings all over the United States just because they want their names to be known by those people and maybe someday it will help them. That is not the good approach. You need to work on yourself, and even just one person knowing you and vouching for you is enough for you. This mentality of like looking at this process like a transaction and just like trying to consume mentorship like a consumer, I think it ends bad, and people can see through that. I have actually heard from program directors saying that, oh, this person has worked with everyone in the United States. I don't know what their end goal is, but we want someone who has commitment. So please, anyone who's listening, just focus on yourself, focus on your resume, on your work, and forget about anyone who says, oh, you don't match without connections, matching is only through connections.
You raised a very, very important point, and I kind of agree with some portions of it, and I kind of disagree with others. And it's important to see different opinions for our viewers on how different people view things. So I 100% agree with you that if you're a bad applicant, you're not going to match, even if the whole country knows you. Because at the end of the day, programs need someone who gets the job done. This is the thing that people don't think about much. When you're a neurosurgery resident, you have to be holding the pager, as you said, day to night. You have to have that stamina of working 6 days a week, very long hours, surgery, floors, nurse complaining, patients complaining. So they want somebody who's able to do the job, even if their friend or their parents or some kind of connection said that this person is good and the person is not actually going to be a functioning, well-rounded resident. This person is going to end up being fired. Like it's not going to work out. So I 100% agree with the fact that if you're not a good applicant, or the program is not convinced that you're gonna be doing the job well, you're not gonna match, even if you know the whole country. But I believe that if you have connections, and what this is, a lot of MGs have a mistake, or maybe the disagreement between us about the idea of what a connection means. Because some people think, oh, connection is my father's friend knows somebody and they'll get me an interview. No, if this is what you think by a connection, this is not what I mean by a connection. By a connection, I mean somebody you really worked with closely, you published projects with, they saw your ability to function within the system, get jobs done, teamwork, leadership, all these skills, and they believed in you because you're good, and they held the phone or they sent an email and they said amazing things about you. That might help your application get seen. Because this is, I think, the part that I slightly disagree with you on, is that a lot of IMG's applications get filtered. They don't even get seen, because not every program, maybe neurosurgery is slightly different because you only have maybe 200 programs or something like that. You don't have like 1,000 like internal medicine, or like 600 like internal medicine. In that case, not every applicant gets fully evaluated holistically, and the programs try to reduce the number of applications, and they were like, IMG's out. So having someone call for you might have your application seen. But here you have to understand something. Here we agree again that if this program is not convinced that you're going to be, among or on the same tier as the other applicants, they're not going to give you an interview. Even if they like your mentor, or even they believe in them, but they see, oh my gosh, the other applicants are way better, this person has no chance of matching it, they're very unlikely to give you an interview. So don't think just the connection by itself or working with some famous mentor will get you a match. It's more of, sometimes it helps your application get seen. Sometimes when they're ranking all these applicants and somebody picks up the phone, it might help. And this is the other thing, Mir, that a lot of people don't know, that each program has a totally different selection criteria, ranking criteria, interviewing criteria. So applicant A might be the top pick of program in Minnesota, while the same applicant might be the last person for a program in California. Just programs view things differently, like humans do. So that's why I try to make sure people understand the complexity of the process. It's not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2, because there's so many variations and things that go into play. And that's why I believe in this individualized one-on-one approach, because each story is different. And you might think, oh, well, my story is similar to that, but there might be some tiny difference that changes the whole advice and what, makes something work or not. So I think that can kind of give people a full picture of the process and the idea of connection, because that's a very important point, and I see people ask about that a lot. Now, moving on to something very important that you did, which is the, I'm not sure if I'm using the term correctly, but pre-residency fellowship, is that the right term?
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of people don't know about that. Can you tell us what is that, how long it is, and what is the value of it?
Yeah, so pre-residency fellowship, I think it's something that's unique to neurosurgery. What it means is that, so as you know, there are prelim surgery and prelim medicine spots that people can do. So in prelim surgery, you'll basically do a year of general surgery, but you are not guaranteed to finish a residency in general surgery. You have to apply again. So pre-residency fellowship is the prelim of neurosurgery. The only difference is that it is not ACGME accredited. Therefore, it doesn't count as the first year of your residency. But other than that, it's exactly the same. So what it means is that you are working basically as a neurosurgery resident. You have the same responsibilities. You take calls, you do procedures, you operate, you interact with attendings just like a resident does, staff consults with them, round on their patients, constantly are in communication with other residents, with attendings, with APPs. And then when your program ends, you apply into neurosurgery. So that's what pre-residency fellowship is. In terms of the logistics of it, there are only a few pre-residency fellowship programs for neurosurgery in the U.S. I think maybe 5 or 6 or 7, something like that programs. It is very competitive to get into it because any IMG that wants to match into neurosurgery, most IMGs that want to match into neurosurgery consider doing that. And it's very, for example, at Sinai, which I applied to and I think is the most prestigious one, there were more than 200 applicants for only 2 spots.
Wow.
When I applied. In order to get into it, the application process is just like match. The only difference is that it's not like the season is different. The season is usually starts a few months later. People start applying in like January, February, and maybe March. And obviously the results will be announced after the match, because if you have matched into another specialty or into neurosurgery, then you will not get into pre-residency. But yeah, that's the gist of it. I think if I want to pick only one factor in my resume that had the biggest impact on me matching, was doing the pre-residency fellowship at Mount Sinai, because I basically did 2 years of neurosurgery. I learned how to take care of neurosurgical patients. I learned the terminology. I learned the procedural skills. I did more than 350 cases, mostly as first assist. I made excellent friendships with residents, learned many things from them, and obviously attendings that I worked with, I operated with every day. I took care of their patients, and they started to trust me, and they helped me in my match process as well.
And some might ask, is that 2 years paid or you have to fund yourself?
No, it's exactly like residency. On my first year, I got paid PGY1 salary. On my second year, I got paid PGY2 salary.
That's awesome. And what is generally the match rate after doing this? Is it like 100%? Everyone who does it ends up matching because you're doing an intern job for 2 years?
So I don't know about other pre-residency fellowships. What I know about Mount Sinai is that the match rate for foreign graduates in neurosurgery is around 17%. For pre-residency fellows, for people who have done pre-residency fellowship at Sinai, our match rate is around 70%, 70, which is just a little bit less than the match rate for American graduates in neurosurgery. So I think that's a very remarkable number, and it shows how significantly it can impact your chances.
Definitely, and it makes sense from a program director standpoint. The main disadvantage of having an IMG is someone who never worked in the process. He or she did not do rotation sabais most of the time in the US. They did not do medical school, so they don't understand the culture. But now that you've done 2 years of actual residency, not only rotations, so it makes sense that you're more like treated like a US graduate, and as you said, the numbers are reflecting that. So that's great to hear. And this is to our audience, as you said, that the example you gave of comparing it to a prelim surgery is a great example, because that's the whole premise of prelim surgery. A lot of IMGs go into prelim surgery, they do a great job, and they end up matching into categorical. But the difference, as you said, is the ACGME accreditation. We can probably provide some links on the different pre-residency fellowships in the description of this video. We can do some search and provide the links for different ones so people can have access to these as well.
Yeah, of course. Pre-residency fellowship at Sinai doesn't really have a website. I mean, it didn't as long as I was there, but I can look into it and provide.
So if they don't have a website, how do people apply to these positions?
It's different for every place. For Mount Sinai, it was through basically directly contacting the program director.
It's some kind of hidden application.
Yeah, it's actually, when I was finishing my program, we were working on, my program director was working on starting a website, so it's more like a standardized, advertised application process.
Okay, so after you went through the resident pre-residency fellowship, you applied to the match. Can you tell us a little bit about the match process, how it went, and focus mainly on the interviews?
Yeah, the match process. So first of all, it was a little challenging for me to prepare my application because I was basically doing residency, like the same hours of residency at that time, and it was just such an exhausting task to do that. The reason I mentioned that is that I want to thank you because your resources and your videos really helped me bypass a lot of confusion and save a lot of time. For example, when I was preparing my ERAS CV, I watched your ERAS CV video, and it just told me A to Z of what to do. So thank you. I never thought one day I'll talk to you.
I'm very glad to be able to help people, like you and everyone with this process. And I'm very glad to have you as now as one of our advisors to help people and future applicants with this process as well.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. But going back to your question, so there are many details that go into preparing your application. And looking back at the whole process, I really think that maybe there are many people who as qualified as I am, or maybe even more qualified. But I really think thinking about those details and actually having a strategy for every single thing during the application process. It obviously starts with just preparing the application material. Who gives you your letters of recommendation? And then what do they write in your letter of recommendation? In order for them to write those stuff, well, you should actually have those stuff. You should have shown those stuff. So what has been your strategy in the past X number of years in order to prove to them that you're worthy of their recommendation? Then in your CV, how do you structure, for example, your papers? What order do you put your papers in? Even dumb things like what email do you create for your ERAS? I don't know, very simple things that people may overlook, but when you think about it, it can actually make a lot of difference. What experiences do you pick to include? Because you can only include, in my year, only 10. What is your strategy for signaling? What is your strategy for geographic preference? These are things that I thought about very extensively. And when I was talking to other applicants, I saw that how variable people are approaching these things. And it just tells you, well, if each person is doing it differently, that all of them cannot be the correct way to do it. So someone is getting an advantage by doing it right. Then moving on to the interviews, I think if I want to pick the most important factor in getting matched is interview, because you can have all of the boxes checked. You can have a perfect clinical experience, perfect research, scores, letters, everything. But if you don't interview well, you're not going to match. So again, the interview thing is a whole world for itself. And I know you have some material on this, and I really use them. And each person should sit down and think, how can I present myself in just a few minutes to someone who has never met me and most likely hasn't read my application, or if they read it, they have forgotten it. How can I present myself to that person in just a few minutes and convey everything that I have gone through to be sitting in front of them in just a few minutes? And there are a lot of caveats to that. I don't want to seem pushy. I don't want to seem nerdy. I don't want to seem dishonest. I don't want that person to think I'm weird. I'm not a normal person. I don't want that person to think I'm arrogant or I'm showing off. Um, basically, it will come down to who you are as a person, and well, you can't really change that, but at least you can work on how to present who you are as a person. So I cannot overemphasize the importance of interviews, and I really think however much time and effort people dedicate to preparing for interviews, it's time and resources well spent.
Yep, I totally agree with you, and that's what's one of the reasons I have all these resources is because I don't want someone to lose advantage because they didn't have a great personal statement or a great ERS application, or they didn't prepare for their interviews well, and that's why we have this whole list of advisors, because I believe there is value in you doing a really good job with your personal statement, the same with your ERS application, and definitely with your interview. In the previous surveys of program directors from the NRMP, they used to rank. I don't believe they issue this survey anymore. They have changed the questions, but they used to rank the things in importance and the percentage of people who agreed with that. And interviews were like number one and two and three and four.
Yeah.
Different factors that you can evaluate in interviews comes in ranking, not picking to interview, but once you interview, how do we rank people? And interviews were like definitely by far the top four, even before your step one research and all the other things. And as you said, it's not because you're not normal. We just don't want you to say something you're normal, but we don't want you to say something that might be understood as weird or off or arrogant. Most of the people are nice people who are great and made it all as far, not just by chance. But you don't want to say something that would give a different idea of who you are and how great you are as a physician, as a doctor, and as a person. So that's why, and Mir, a lot of people don't understand how complicated it is. It requires a lot of time to brainstorm all the different ideas that you want to mention in your interviews, and then pick the most important ones, because every word you say might convey strength and convey a story and convey something that people didn't know about you. Because people think everyone that interviewed you read your whole CV and personal statement. That's not the case. They have so many applicants, so you have to make sure, even if they didn't read anything on your CV, anything about your personal statement, you have to come out of the interview, leave a very nice impression, tell them all about these strengths and amazing things you've done without seeming arrogant, with having a good report and a nice person to sit next to and like operate with for 9 hours without feeling bored or feeling weird.
Yeah, exactly. To elaborate on your point, first of all, you mentioned a very important thing. Every word that comes out of your mouth should be measured. Because again, you only have a few minutes and you want to convey your whole existence to a bunch of other people. So don't waste time talking about things that do not actually help you. And I gave this example before in another interview. For example, a question that you may get asked is that what is the most memorable case for you, or like what is a case that you learned a lot from, or what is the coolest case you've done, something like that. You can pick, you can choose to just like describe a cool case, and neurosurgery is full of that. Or you can actually have a strategy to convey your strength through the thing that you say. And that is true for every question. What is a mistake that you made? What is an experience that you had with the patient family? Like all of those behavioral questions, they are not just to see like how you talk. They are basically an opportunity for you to show who you are, what experiences you have, what strengths you have. For example, when they asked me, I'm going to use another example. When they asked me, what is a mistake that you made, or what is an example of a bad interaction or a difficult interaction that you had with other residents or your seniors. So I use that opportunity to actually show how experienced I am. And I picked a true story about an EVD, a very important bedside procedure that I did. And it was done perfectly, but I forgot to erase the mark on the forehead of the patient. And then my chief resident not only didn't give me any credit for doing the procedure perfectly, he actually scolded me in front of the attending for forgetting to erase that. And and then I said yes, I was upset, but it was actually I realized how important it is to do things perfectly, because you don't want to be the family member and see your loved one with a marking on their forehead, because you don't know what just happened. The only thing that you're going to understand is the marking. So through that question, I showed that, yeah, I'm doing EVDs. I am interacting with chief residents. I am taking care of patients, and I can take feedback. I realize how important it is to do things perfectly and always grow. So you can choose to say like something irrelevant, or like talk about, I don't know, politically correct things, you know what I mean? Or just like actually show them what a strong applicant you are.
That's a really good example. You know, even one time that I remember now, the most extreme I took this was a movie. They told me what a movie you've seen recently or a movie that you liked, and I took the movie and I flipped it into like a strength, and to go back to talk about me in a very nice way. It doesn't have to look weird or like this is so off. It just has
Yeah.
to flow with the story and flow with the flow of the interview.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, the movie thing is another good example. I did the same thing. They asked me what's a movie that you like or you, I don't know, resonate with. And I hadn't actually thought about it beforehand. And on the spot, I came up with Pursuit of Happiness. I don't know if you've seen that movie or not. It's a true story about someone who is living in like absolute poverty, and decides to lift themselves out of that by becoming a Wall Street broker. And they go through so much difficulty, and then like the high point of the movie is an interview scene that they're doing with the head of the law firm. So I used that interview scene, and I actually said, yeah, I have been through a lot in my life. I have been through a lot of hardships to just get there and sit here in front of you. And that person, someone trusted him, and someone gave him the opportunity to live his dreams, and actually took them seriously, even though they probably didn't look like the part. I'm a foreign graduate. I know I'm not your typical applicant. I'm not the typical person that you would take, but I've been through all of these things, and I just need someone who takes me seriously and actually looks at me. So there are these like small moments.
That's really good. That's really
Yeah.
good. You guys, if you want to prepare with me, he's available. That's really good example. Yes, I agree. These tiny things that can make a difference. It might remind them that you did research, you did this pre-residency fellowship. Because sometimes, again, applicants, things look similar and things start standing out by answers like that. I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in the details. It's all in the details, because when you have, okay, for each neurosurgery, I don't know how it is for plastic surgery. For neurosurgery, for each spot, on average, 250 to 350 people are applying. And I promise you, all of those people are exceptional applicants. And then for each spot, 50 people are being interviewed on average. It's variable, let's say 40 to 60. So how on earth are you going to show that you're better than 49 other people by talking about irrelevant generic stuff? Another example is personal statement. I forgot to mention that. Everyone is going to give you the advice of, in your personal statement, don't say anything weird. Just write less than one page and make it. Just don't say anything controversial. Don't stand out. People are just want to make sure you don't have red flags in your personal statement. No, that's not the case. A personal statement is the absolute best opportunity for you to show what's special about you, to show why you stand out of those 350 applicants. And you should take risks with your personal statement. And in my opinion, it doesn't matter if it's one paragraph or two paragraphs longer than the advice that people give you, no one is going to throw your application out for one more paragraph, but you have the opportunity to tell someone who you are, what you've been through, and why they should take you seriously, as opposed to all those generic personal statements that they're reading, the unimpressive, boring personal statements that all look like each other.
Yep.
So I think it's very important to take those moments and actually showcase who you are.
Yep, I 100% agree with that. And my personal statement was the same. It had like my story. I did not, I had some people actually, don't mention this and don't mention that. I'm like, this is my story. This is who I am. It has to come in there. That's why it's called personal statement. And to comment on your point too, everyone, I hear this a lot. It has to only be one page. You should not go over one page. My personal statement was a paragraph over the one page. I got 24 plastic surgery interviews that I match at my number one choice. So I think it works out. It doesn't have to, don't be just some people just talk and talk and talk without substance. And in that case, yes, keep it to one page. But if you have a real story to tell, really engaging personal statement, one extra paragraph, few extra lines is not going to make a difference. So Mir, as we're approaching the end, what final advice do you have people who are listening to this seriously considering neurosurgery in the US? What advice would you give them?
My final advice is going back to my earlier point. If you really want to match into neurosurgery, you should face the hard truth, the bitter reality that it is extremely, extremely, extremely difficult for a foreign graduate. Every year, 10 to 15 people match. Many of those people who are people who actually are already neurosurgeons in their own country, or they have done multiple years of something, most likely research in that institute, and they end up matching in the same place. You will not be competing with those people. So in reality, you should be one of the top few people in order to match into neurosurgery as a foreign graduate. So if you want that to happen for yourself, first of all, you have to have the warrior mentality. You shouldn't give up. It's gonna be very difficult. Second of all, look at your resume objectively and see what you can improve on. Don't keep doing the same things over and over again. If you have good papers, it's enough. Don't keep just publishing for no reason. I don't say publishing is not good, but if your time is limited, you should dedicate it to things that are actually adding value to your resume. You should have a well-rounded application. No one should be able to basically dismiss you because of any reason. You should have clinical experience, you should have good recommenders, you should have good research experience, good scores, and a well-prepared application. And on top of all of that, the cherry on the top is your interview skills. So my advice to everyone is that do not skip one of these steps. Do not skip one aspect of the resume in favor of applying faster, because then you're going to be stuck in the cycle of applying and applying and applying, and each year that you apply, your chances go down. Apply when you're absolutely ready for it, but try to check all of those boxes so that objectively no one can dismiss you. And if you don't get matched, it's basically only other people's fault. You don't have anything to blame yourself for.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Mir, for joining us. I know you're extremely busy. Thank you so much for this advice and for taking the time.
I appreciate you having me, and I enjoyed our conversation a lot. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. For our viewers, if you're interested in learning about the process, if you need any help with your application, we have a full dedicated list of advisors from different specialties that are more than happy to help you with this process. I'll leave all the links for our different services in the description below if you want to schedule a consultation with our customer support team who can guide you how we can best help you. That's also available to you. Thank you so much for joining, and good luck on your match.